Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Samuel Adams Returns. Those anti-federalists absolutely got it right, and this is Tom Novolis, your host. And I'm welcoming you back to this continuation of the saga of the demise of America. Really? Yes. So many of you that have been listening to the likes of Liberty Works Radio Network over the many years, and those that have been listening to really solid preaching, like Dr. Mike Spalding, like, Doug Wilson, and many others, have a clear understanding of, that Reformation truth and what it means to take and have Scripture truly implemented throughout every aspect of who we are as a people. And as you've heard me many, many times talk about, is what does that mean in relationship to businesses, education, and so on, family. Well, today we're going to look at what I've been dealing with a lot lately is that of the doctrine of the lesser magistrate, and we're going to even move that away to some extent from the Lutheran perspective and into that for the Calvinist. And you're looking at me, or you're listening on the program and going, Tom, what in the world has that to do with the mirrors of history, with Sam Adams and the anti-federalist? And what does that mean in anything relevant to today? Well, I woke up, and because it was so critical for me to understand on my calendar, I totally forgot, and shamefully forgot, about Earth Day. Really? Why did we not celebrate April 16th? What was April 16th? The shot that was heard around the world. That shot where Sam Adams raised his hands and eyes to heaven and said, "It has finally begun." That wasn't talked about anywhere. I mean, I do have to say that during the Trump administration, it was talked about because that was the formal beginning of the American Revolution, when the colonies were fully coming together, starting in Massachusetts with that Battle of Lexington and Concord. April 16th. Now, instead, what we have is the president, John Kerry, and all of the other communists bowing down to global idolatry. And that becomes very important when we think about the lesser magistrate. And I am going to talk to you a bit today about probably a couple different things. I'm changing it up. I got to be honest with you. This program just has come to fruition within the last 2 hours. I was going to go down a totally different path, and I'll mention that path. That path was going to take and look at Pastor John MacArthur in California a tidbit more, in that, I got to ask this question. I mean, that guy doesn't know me any more than a fruit fly amongst horse flies in a field of road apples. Okay? He has no clue who I am, and probably never will. He would never even recognize me in a crowd of a half a person. So the point of that is, though, I would really like to know, and I'm not going to dwell on it, but I would really like to know when John MacArthur really understood Calvinism as taught by Theodore Beza John Knox, and so many more of the reformers? When did he become aware of the truths of Christian resistance? And with that, I give him great kudos for what he and, as I was reading, several thousand other pastors in California have been doing, being unmuzzled, maskless, and taking a position against the tyranny of the governor and the elected there in the Communist Republic of California. So with that, I want to kind of move through something that I was last week and the week before in relationship to business, and how we see that business is collaborating with the government to enforce things which the legislature, the federal legislature, cannot really legislate, nor can the bureaucratic entities really impose on people. You have to go back and first off understand that executive orders are only to be handled within those executive departments. Now, sadly, what we have seen is that Congress has given over its authority in so many different ways to these bureaucratic entities. And therefore, these bureaucratic entities have been, many years, even under the other Republicans, oppressive. And the Earth Day thing is, this whole thing on sustainability and all that we'll get into, is part of that oppression. But I just, as I said, within the last 2 hours in digging into something, I thought this was something that needed to be flashed here in this first segment. And that is how American small businesses are being coerced to help build the oligarchy. The reference is there in the promo, and boy, just go back and look at it at right over my shoulder here, SamuelAdamsReturns.net. SamuelAdamsReturns.net is where you're going to find this article on how American small businesses are being coerced to help build the oligarchy. So what we're seeing, and what I talked about most recently, is that you have all these major corporations. I mean, you saw them come out like crazy after that guilty verdict on that police officer, and they're all throwing in their hats on all this pressure now on this whole social justice warrior, this race theory, insanity, and evil, which it is, and all of that. But here, the headliner on this goes, while corporations are leading our government by the nose, small business is more often an unwilling victim pleading for any path they can to survive their rulers. We're seeing that in Ohio. In fact, we had some lawsuits here in Ohio where now we're finding that in one county, the judge came out and said that the masking mandates by our Gouverneur de Swine are unconstitutional. And I can prove that because you can find in the notes as well the Article 1, which is the Bill of Rights of the state of Ohio, which clearly indicate that what DeWine is doing, he can't do because it's our rights, our property, and business owners have a right to protect their property from abuse, which is happening under these various mandates. And the fact that where DeWine needs to be sued is that everybody knows, because the CDC has said that Ohio is misrepresenting the mechanisms and data. So we have the state health director lying, and we have Therefore, many county health directors lying. They're all on an agenda to suppress businesses, to suppress property. But this is an interesting article. I don't want to take up a whole lot of time, but it falls right within the whole scope of the lesser magistrate, where you have all the small businesses pleading. And I know many of the small businesses with the Free Ohio Now is taking and working with a lot of small businesses to ensure that they know how to stand up for their rights against this oppressive and tyrannical government. Yeah. So all these mask mandates, all these various things, very interesting article. I will let you go to it. But in so many states, everything is being shut down, or all these restrictions are put in. Oh, if you have a menu, only one person can ever touch that menu. And then you got to throw it away. How do you do business if you're, having to do that? Oh, you have to do this. You can only limit so many people to come in. Oh, if you're a store, if you're a little mom pop grocery store, you have to have all these restrictions and blah, 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 and all of this stuff. But, if you're Walmart, if you're, all of the other big box stores, you can do whatever you want in restricting people's rights. And, don't forget, all the airlines are going to mandate you to have your travel pass of your communist shot. I call it a communist shot because it's from the Chi-Com flu that the whole thing even started. And remember, folks, it's not a vaccine. It is an emergency effort to take and interject into this so-called crisis, man-made. Well, with that, it just gets interesting. So when we come back, what do we got? A couple minutes, Kath? 3.5 minutes? Anyway, 2.5? 3.5. Okay. Hey, you know what? I'm void at time. She's got it. I'll just wait till she holds her hand up or something. Anyway, what we are going to dig into a bit, we're going to get back to the whole Earth Day insanity, and I wish I had one of my business partners on the line today, because we could really hammer into that, because he's doing a fantastic job in trying to bring reality back into the insanity of sustainability. It's just a disaster, a total disaster. But what I would like to take and bring our attention to, and I am going to get in the next segment into this a lot more, is an article that was written in the Law and History Review that is part of a larger book on the rights, resistance, and revolution in the Western tradition. And this article itself is that title, Rights, Resistance, and Revolution in the Western Tradition, Early Protestant Foundations, by John Witter, Jr. Now, this gets into, first off, what we've been talking about on the Lesser Magistrate. And I do want to let you know that next week I will have Matt Truella on the program. So Matt's going to be gracious enough to join me as we delve deeper into this in relationship to what does that mean in the churches, what does that mean in local governance, and what does that mean from a foundational basis in that which Christians need to participate and act for liberties, reason, and purposes, because that's what God gave us, all right? And those are the types of things that we'll be talking about next week. And wherever it goes with Matt, I'm really looking forward to that conversation. But as we come back, we're going to dig into that, and we're going to dig into one of my favorite Calvinists, being Theodore Beza, because I know Sam Adams studied him as well as the Anti-Federalists. So come on back for the next segment, because Sam Adams and the Anti-Federalists, they got it right. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to this second segment of Samuel Adams Returns. Those anti-federalists, they did get it right. This is Tom Novolis, your host, and as I always do in this segment, please go to Liberty Works Radio Network and find that donate button in particular and donate. We need you to donate. This is a listener-funded network, and I sure do appreciate everybody that is a part of the family at Liberty Works Radio Network. For those in Ohio, I want to also let you know that the Institute on the Constitution, I am associated now with them as an affiliate, and we're looking to do a lot of classes, get people educated, and especially those here in northern Ohio, where I have a lot easier to get around to. And there's folks all across the state that can help put on some educational classes in your area. And with that, exciting news is that we are taking and working on a class for the Ohio Constitution. So if you would contact me at tom@samueladamsreturns.com. The website is samueladamsreturns.net, but my email is tom@samueladamsreturns.com. Then we can take and get you that information on what's going on with the Ohio Constitution. We need folks to donate to that so that we can make this the high quality program that is what the Institute on the Constitution is known for, is high quality training and programming. So look forward to that again on the Ohio Constitution. If you're interested not only in donating to that, but also to be someone that wants to participate in helping write sections of that, contact me at my email, which is tom@samueladamsreturns.com. So let's jump back over here to this rights resistance revolution in the Western tradition, early Protestant foundations. So for this case, I am going to the end of this. And Napoleon Bonaparte once quipped, quote, "I would rather face 10,000 Italians coming from Mass than 1,000 Presbyterians rising from their knees." Wow. Wow, wow, wow. You see, what we're going to talk about is what happened within that Protestant movement that drew that much fear into the likes of a Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon, he was a notorious anti-papal, pope person, and he was a French snob against Italians and all of that. But he also knew the danger of the fierce, righteous warrior who was a Calvinist. Those that understood really the true definitions of the biblical truths of resistance. And as we've talked, and we will talk next week with Matt Truella regarding the lesser magistrate, there's things that have happened. And as this article, when this article was written and published, here in my notes, what we have is that over the past 3 decades, there's been a veritable cottage industry of important new scholarship emerging dedicated to the history of rights talk in the Western tradition prior to the Enlightenment. Well, there's a lot of talk. But how much action have we seen? Now, I know that in many of the Reformed, both in the Reformed Baptist community as well as in the Reformed Presbyterian area, there has been a lot of that talk. But what does that mean in relationship to how do we govern? How do we become participants in governing and understanding everything that we need to establish a righteous government? Well, wait a minute. Are we even supposed to have a righteous government? Well, let me tell you, that was something that Sam Adams, again, clearly understood, was the idea that the people had that sense of liberty to the extent that they could, with following that proper organization of the lesser magistrates, there was those mechanisms on how to resist tyrants. It's just there. It's there. And, that's something here in this document. Again, you can find the link to it at samueladamsreturns.net. Right above my shoulder here is where you can find this document and go through this, because a lot of people, quite frankly, don't know who Beza is. And that, again, goes to the fault of the cemeteries for not taking, and Kath is rolling over here laughing. And if you knew what a chore that is for her at this particular time, it's fun to see her laugh. But the cemeteries quit teaching these fundamental truths. And one of the things that Beza had clearly said is that in a summation statement, he says that the people are not for the government, but the government is for the people. And that is biblically sound, and he proves it. He takes that after the whole idea of the Lutheran perspective of the lesser magistrate. So one of the couple of components that I wanted to drive home here, I know you're asking, what does this have to do with Earth Day? Well, we may not really get to that until the third segment, but what it means is that we have tyranny being imposed upon us by our federal government, and those states that are taking and being collaborators with the federal government on instituting idolatry and religion that is contrary to our foundation and our founding fathers' perspective of Christianity, we have a right to resist. And Earth Day has everything to do with that, because Earth Day is absolute tyranny. Absolute tyranny that is being imposed on us, not only to steal our money, but to destroy Christianity, to destroy that which God has really created, being you and me, our posterity, our children, our grandchildren, and limiting our children and grandchildren as to whether or not they will have a right to have children. And you better look into this Chi-Com shot that is being produced by all of these corporations, because more and more is coming out on those that are actually doing research that it also inhibits fertility. Oh my, that's exactly what Bill Gates wanted, to reduce the human population. And you know that the other thing that Billy Boy wants, and I know we're jumping to the third segment a bit, Billy Boy wants to take and inhibit the sun coming into the earth to help with global warming. Yeah, Billy Boy, you're sick person. But that's what Beza said, and that's what Calvin said, and that's what the people during the period of Magdeburg said. And let me see if I can find what they said here, because fundamentally what they said was that if a magistrate is not acting as one who honors God and who is carrying out the good for the people, especially those that are intent on worshiping God, then they're from the devil, flat out. My dad says that a lot of times, is that, that from the devil. But that's exactly what it said. They said in Magdeburg is that if you are taking, and you as a magistrate, holy smokes, we're down to 5 minutes. Man, we'll just keep on with this here. But it just comes down to it is that if you're taking and you're not being a magistrate that is fostering good Christian religion, as well as ensuring the protection of our sacred, inalienable rights, then you're of the devil. Okay, who's going to preach that from the pulpit? I know it won't be the guy that owns a megachurch over here in the Solon. Actually, it's not Solon or Chagrin Falls. They don't even know where they exist because their church physically resides in Geauga County in the Bainbridge area, which is interesting because they never have Solon cops there. They always have either Geauga County sheriffs or, the Bainbridge Police Department. But they like to tout that they're in Solon or in Chagrin Falls because it makes them look better. Anyway, in the article, he takes you through a good summary, which we'll talk about on the Magdeburg Confession, and Matt Truella will help us with that in detail next week. But Theodore Beza, he came out with all of these additional concepts from a Calvinistic perspective. Again, Magdeburg was Lutheran perspective, and the Calvinist perspective with Beza, and not only Beza, but other writers that I really like. I mean, I've read Beza very much, but John Ponnet, whoa, he's top notch. I love John Knox. Remember, he's the guy that carried a claymore, and you know what a claymore is. That's that big sword. You don't carry something like that unless you know how to use it. Christopher Goodman, and then there were others as well that during that period of time. But the whole idea is that Beza, he wrote this massive tract that I've talked to you about before in 1574. And what we did is that Beza sought to balance that divine and popular sovereignty. While the power that are ordained by God, they are elected by the people who, here's it is about the muzzle's mask, who as God's image bearers on earth act on God's behalf and exercise God's sovereignty in choosing or consenting to these rulers. You remember that although David was anointed, he had to be voted and acknowledged by the people. Although Saul was picked, he had to be accepted by the people. That just, elections are important and have been as part of, if you want to have rulers, especially in a republic, then you have to vote on those rulers. And they can't do things without your consent. So you go back to the Ohio State Constitution. It says all power is in the people. So I think that's absolutely interesting. And where they got that idea was from Theodore Beza, as he argued these points into the offices that the magistrates are put into offices by the election or consent of the people. So Beza develops all of that. He was one of the key people to develop that. And that the political covenant establishes not just a singular ruler, but multiple rulers who serve in part to check and balance each other. You have to understand, from Beza's perspective, constitutions are a covenant. They're covenantal. They're not just a contract. They're covenantal. I bring that out a lot in what I talk about in my book that is From Covenant to the Present Constitution. Beza also distinguishes the magistrates, the two kinds of lower magistrates who are buttresses against tyranny. Sam Adams was exactly that. Sam Adams was elected as a tax collector. Sam Adams was elected as a lesser magistrate into that which was the governing body in Massachusetts. Samuel Adams did not act as a anarchist Sam Adams acted in his station as an elected official, as well as many of the anti-federalists. And they did. They got it right. So come on back for the third segment as we kind of close up here. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to this third segment of Samuel Adams Returns. Those anti-federalists, they did. They got it right. And you know something? I am so delighted that all you folks from Soaring Eagle Radio are back. Yes, you are the Screaming Eagles. And as you understand and you hear everything that I'm talking about on the Lesser Magistrate, go back to the second segment and get that whole introduction to Theodore Beza and what that means. We're going to continue with that. And then I'm going to kind of tie it in, not a whole lot, because I don't want to give a whole lot to this Earth Day insanity. But you need to understand, all of us, everyone that is listening to this, that first off, you can get the archive of this program at samueladamsreturns.net. And you can find us on YouTube, but there's, the podcast that you can download and everything. But more importantly is that you have to understand that you're the government. For those of you down in Lima and all over Ohio, I'd love to come down and talk to you sometime about the doctrine of lesser magistrate and how Theodore Beza looked at that. And we're going to talk about some of the key points here. And the fact is that you, especially in Ohio, based on how our Bill of Rights in Article 1 is written, is that you have a total right to engage and petition your lower magistrates, that being your trustees, but even closer, those that are in your political area as your, what do they call those that are in your political, your precinct people. You can petition them and hold them accountable to do what is right, because in essence, they are elected officials and a part of a political body. So you can petition them and absolutely tell them to do what is right. Which one of the things you can tell him to do is to get rid of DeWine, because he's a tyrant. By every definition that I talked about before, he is an absolute tyrant, and the lieutenant governor is culpable in tyranny as Beza defines that, which you're going to have to look at the article that I was talking about and am talking from by John Witter. And you can get that at samueladamsreturns.net. So sign up for the newsletters, do all of the other things that if you go to YouTube, do, hit the check mark, ring the bell, do all of that fun stuff. I don't promote that much, but please let me know that you are listening to the program. Send me an email sometime and find out more. That Beza says that you lower magistrates, that means your school board, your township trustees, work together. You have to provide that buttress against tyranny. You're that buffer between the supreme magistrate and the people. That means even if it's a county commissioners, even if it's the governor, township trustees have a lot of power, and you need to do something about that. In fact, here in my township, my township trustees have right now before them a resolution/ordinance that they will be voting into action to make our township the first Second Amendment protection area in the state of Ohio. So how about that? They're doing the right thing. They're interposing. They're standing between us, the people, in our township. Now, anyway, let's keep on with Beza, because let's see. Like the supreme magistrates, each of you lesser magistrates swore a political oath. I've talked about oaths before. An oath to the protection and defense of, in this case, he talks about kingdom. We're talking about the state of Ohio in the United States, or your state in Maryland, or your state in West Virginia, or your state, those lesser magistrates swore an oath to protect and defend it, each in accordance with their own office. That even means you folks in the school board, you're not supposed to allow the 1619 and all this critical race nonsense to happen. You're supposed to stand between the innocent children and all the evil that is being foisted on them from higher up, from the administration of a governor. Remember, those administrative are appointed people. They're not elected people. The school board members are elected, half of them in the state of Ohio. But the policies pushed, you have to stand up against. All right, here we go. Second group of magistrates are the democratic representatives of the people. That's all you elected. You stand up for the rights in a crisis of tyranny. This, once again, here in Ohio, and many other places, it's the township trustees are those first elected magistrates that must stand up in a time of crisis or tyranny against the lies, deception, and actions of your governor. Then the state legislators. But first, you in the townships. Okay? All right, so there's three ways that a political covenant imposed mutual obligations on God, the rulers, and the people. Okay, here it is. It's all about, as I said, constitutionalism is covenantal. Beza lays that out. He argues that political covenant bound all political rulers to abide by the law of God and the law of nature. Goes into great description. I don't have time to get into that, but that's the first thing that he argues in this three ways of a political covenant is imposed on God, a mutual obligations, a covenant. You know, go back to the Abrahamic covenant. Go back to all of those, the new covenant of what Christ did on the cross. You talk about, as I mentioned before, the great interposer. Wow is all you can say. Second, in addition to requiring obedience of the laws of God and nature, the political covenant required political rulers to protect and promote the rights and liberties and privileges and freedoms of the people. The people were not created for the sake of rulers, but the rulers for the sake of the people, is what Theodore Beza proclaimed famously. And he goes through this in detail, and he talks about what that means from just the 10 Commandments alone. Just the 10 Commandments alone. And he talks about what is it that to natural law, the Decalogue goes beyond it to natural law, common decency, natural equity, and what? A whole list of natural rights of the people that the political covenant should protect. Folks, the majority of your elected don't do anything with this. They don't understand it. And by virtue of the fact that they are violating the laws of God with all the perversions that they allow to come in, they are violating to the extent that I talked about on that fourth aspect of things, is that they must be stood up against. And you can't necessarily do it. Beza says, you know what, private persons, you have free speech, you have all of that, you have the right to rebuke the magistrates, but you do not have the right to violate the laws. You do not have the right to sin. You do not have the right to cause anarchy. You must petition and go through those who you, and folks that are on the radio and the podcast, I'm pointing at the camera at you, elected. So you're responsible to get out there and do something about it. So pretty interesting. Pretty interesting. Let's see. Political covenants are comparable, is what Visa, to private contracts. Political covenants must accord with the basic laws of God and nature for the political office and must be free from unconscionable or unnatural conditions. Wow. We got a lot there to deal with. Political covenant, also like a private contract, political covenants must be entered into voluntarily and not through force, fear, or fraud. So we have a lot of that going on right now in government, especially in the voting. And I will let you know that we're going to talk about the elections and the voting fraud and all of that on that second week of May. We're going to have a unique guest, an expert in that relationship here. So next week we're going to have Pastor Matt I'm sorry, Matt. I'm moving too fast. My brain's going. Trewhella. 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 Yeah, I spelled it. I think I got it right. Anyway, Matt, you'll clear me up next week. Sorry about that. But with that, let's get back to last 3 minutes. Oh, 4 minutes. Kath just gave me the 4 minutes. So in these last 4 minutes, let's take all of this and we look at the contract, covenant, and everything like that, and we know that it should fall within the scope of how does that honor God, how does that honor who we are as His creation and our responsibilities for, as we talked with Pastor Wilson a couple weeks ago, in family, in work, in government, in everything that there is in society. It has to be brought before the sovereignty of God first and foremost. So with that, we go back to all of the insanity of this week, and that being ding, 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 climate change. So here we have, once again, you got old Harry Carey out there meeting in person with Chinese and ignoring all the human rights abuses of the Chinese, ignoring the fact that they are the progenitors of the Chi-Kung flu, and they're all about that too. And then Biden mulling over offering asylum or other legal protection to climate migrants. So now you got all these people that are going to come in and say, I'm leaving Nicaragua, I'm leaving El Salvador, I'm leaving all of these horrible places because of climate change. Yeah, down in the Ecuadorian region, or close to it, within that areas, climate change. You know what? I've seen a lot of road apples, and, I think these guys are chewing on them. Anyway, you keep going. Then you got this Greta little evil woman and all of her stuff. And then you have all of these different, what do they call them, corporations that are giving in to the social justice and everything about climate change so that we can take and control the population. Yeah. Earth Day insanity signals a U.S. Open for climate change migrants. Activists dump cow manure at the White House because Biden is not radical enough on climate change. And here's the other thing on how your religious freedoms are going to be attacked, have been attacked, and will continue to be attacked on this whole thing is that, CDC and Fauci and crew want to keep you muzzled, in muzzles and muzzled forever. Forever. Wow. Isn't that all interesting? I'm thankful that there's a God in heaven and that what Beza talks about, and, I got to say, John MacArthur nails it. Government's not going to save you. Elections aren't going to save you. You're responsible to participate in governing by self-governing first and foremost. So your action item for this week is to take and read this paper that I have been talking to you about. is that this whole rights resistance revolution in Western tradition, as it is the early Protestants, because Sam Adams, he basically wrote it and he understood it, and he understood the Reformation in totality. So come on back next week when we talk more about the author of the Lesser Magistrate, which the Anti-Federalists were all about.